Welcome to Scoop World Order. It is Monday. It is summertime. The team is in week 2 of conditioning, so the heat is about to turn up. These guys are about to get absolutely ran into the ground by Mickey Marotti and staff because that is what it takes to make a great football team. So we're going to check in on some of the stuff that we heard over the weekend. A couple of very interesting lifting stats that we saw that we're going to pass along to you guys. And also, we're going to talk about the bungled, and I mean bungled, TV contract that Kevin Warren engineered, because why wouldn't he screw up everything that he touches, because he's an absolute moron. And we're going to take your questions. But with that being said, as always, we're very thankful and we're grateful to you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in each and every day. We have a blast doing this with you guys. So get your questions fired up. As always, if you can hit that like button, that is huge. Click subscribe, send it to your friends. Again, we appreciate that. And if you love the live shows, hit that little alert bell. We're going to get cranked up and rolling here. I'm going to go right to my good friend, Nevadabuck. Nevada, how are you?
Doing great, man. It's a lot of stuff kind of breaking around the Big Ten, and what a weekend! What a great weekend with the PGA Championship and some Kevin Warren debacles and some great summer conditioning nuggets going. So lots of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Oh, what's up, Daniel Henry up in the join our first guy, our first regular. Thank you. Michael Warren, the TV deal thing. Pete Thamel came with a huge expose on ESPN, kind of showing how he bunked the whole thing up. He mentioned, he gave NBC permission to have the Big Ten championship, which is something that he did not have the express written authority to do, because that is property of the Big Ten Network, which is owned majority by Fox. He also, Big Ten football night games, which has been a huge no-no for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. Again, there's a lot of people on our message board who have a huge thread about this, talking about all high school plays at night in November, NFL, other colleges play at night in November. The Big Ten's just kind of old and stodgy. And there's a big payback. I mean, for giving up that game to NBC in 2026, ESPN, or excuse me, Fox is owed $40 million because they don't have the rights to that game. So it's a pretty big screw up. And then the Big Ten also hired Korn Ferry, which is one of the national firms, to decide if they do indeed owe Kevin Warren a bonus, much like Jim Delaney got when he was out at the Big Ten a few years ago. Nevada, how big of a screw up is this? How tone deaf is this? How incompetent is this? The fact that Ryan Day spoke out against it, Tom Izzo spoke out against it. Just the fact that you've got the two of the most noteworthy coaches in the country talking about how they were left in the dark with the negotiations. They're left in the dark with the night games, the switch to NBC. Losing a ton of money. I mean, writing a check for $40 million when Ohio State's athletic department had to take out a loan to cover their nut from the 2020 season where they made no money because of COVID. How big of a mistake is this by Kevin Warren?
Well, look, it's a big mistake. It's one of those mistakes that Kevin Warren's a lawyer, so you don't really understand how he could make a mistake like this. But I think we got to break down the issues a little bit at a time, because, when you just talk about the Kevin Warren's incompetence, that's kind of like a big onion, but then you got to start pulling the layers back and kind of seeing what we're talking about here. Let's take the first one, the night games in November. Um, I remember vividly having a very specific conversation about this with Andy Geiger. For people that remember Andy Geiger, in my opinion, was one of the great, on the pantheon of great athletic directors, certainly in college sports in general, and Ohio State in particular. I think he did so many good things. Was just a giant of a guy that had big vision for expansion of facilities, improvement of facilities. Oversaw some of the best hires, and these hires were not perfect, but he's the guy that brought Jim Tressel to Ohio State, and again, just an amazing guy. And he was the type of guy that when he'd come out to the West Coast, he'd call me and we'd have lunch, and it was just Andy and I, and it wasn't a lunch for 50, and you were there. I mean, it was me and Andy, and we'd sit and talk about stuff. And he talked about the night games in November. And he said, the problem with doing the night games, doing night games in general back then, because you got to remember, back then we were just kind of sticking our toe in the water about even doing night games. He's like, he goes, the amount of emails or letters that I'll get from alumni talking about how they don't want to drive home in the snow, in the dark weather, going there, and that's it. And he goes, I just, it's amazing how much pushback you get about doing that. And so I really believe that's like the major push point for a lot of these schools is old alumni that don't want to drive home in the dark. And I, I mean, I get it on one hand. On the other hand, I don't get it. But then it goes to the issue of can you make a change like that without at least consulting your all of your coaches, but certainly your key thought leaders. And from my standpoint, that was Warren's big error on this. And I think he was getting a little excited, doing these things, trying to oversee these what he thought were huge changes for the Big Ten and stuff that could significantly increase the revenues. But he got ahead of himself and did all this and literally never went to the coaches and told them that he was going to be making these changes. And I think that's just one of those unforgivable mistakes that rookie managers make on a guy that certainly at his level shouldn't make. But that's kind of par with the course that we've come to expect with Kevin Warren. And again, I've given Kevin Warren credit when it's due. I think he's made just some major absolute blunders in the thing, and I'm glad that he's gone. And I think the guy that we have now is an absolute stone cold killer. And I don't think Ohio State and the Big Ten could not have made a better hire. And I think the Big Ten is positioned for greatness, and I think we'll survive the Warren ineptitude. But boy, he left us some lousy parting gifts on the way out there with these blunders.
Yeah, I think Tony Petitti is a huge heart, the new Big Ten commissioner. I think that, the way that we mismanaged COVID, the way we tested our kids to death, the way we didn't let the parents weren't even allowed to sit in the very top of the stadium for senior day in 2020. Nobody was allowed in the building when we played Illinois. It just was an unspeakable error in judgment and just overall stupidity of not just Kevin Warren, but of the presidents, the administration that let that happen. Because, you back in time, it's amazing that's only a couple years ago, but the SEC and the ACC just kept on rolling, kept playing football, fans in the stands, and we're in the same country. We're in the same, we're one state over, or two states over, and they're just playing football. And Michael Warren and these presidents nope, we're not allowed to have anybody in the building. The kids aren't allowed to see their parents. The kids have to go right to their apartments afterwards. So again, this is just par for the course when you bungle this TV deal. The thing I'm interested in with this night game is that, we've got Michigan State in the middle of November next year, and Ohio Stadium has not been winterized. So there could be pipes bursting. And again, the reason they haven't done it is because it costs a bunch of money. It's an old building. They never planned on having winter events, which is why we've never had a winter classic. We've never had, when Ohio State plays Michigan, they have to go up to Brown Stadium because that stadium is winterized. We've never had the Blue Jackets play the Blackhawks or the Red Wings or the Penguins or anybody. When all these other stadiums that aren't as nice as Ohio Stadium, they've had events, and it's because it's not a winterized stadium. So that'll be fascinating to see. Does Ohio State have to do that now? They're on the hook for that, or they're just going to roll the dice and hope that it's a warm seasonal day in mid-November? Because mid-November can be really cold. Like when we played Michigan in 2007, it was probably November 18th maybe, or around there. I mean, it was a week before Thanksgiving, so it wasn't too late in the month, and it was 30 degrees and freezing rain, and it was it was 1 degree above freezing because it didn't snow, but it was just freezing bone cold rain. So it's gonna be interesting, man. Nevada, what are your thoughts on having a November night game in the shoe? It's never happened before. I think a lot of people are cautiously optimistic it's going to be pretty cool. Again, I think people are more and more conditioned to night football because of Thursday night football and Sunday night football, Monday night football, high school football, Friday night football, Saturday night football. But what are your thoughts on that? And another thing I didn't think of is with that Saturday night, does that, I just wonder how that'll affect high school playoff games. Because these high school playoff games, they depend on the draw of the crowd, and OSU depends on the money from the playoff games. And now all of a sudden, you're going to be going against an Ohio State home game. So, those people that are on the fence about going to a high school game in Ohio on that Saturday are going to say, nah, I'm going to stay home and watch the Buckeyes play in the warmth of my house. But what are your thoughts? But your pros and cons of the Ohio State Michigan State being a Saturday at night in the middle of November?
Okay, on the pro side, it's going to be an amazing atmosphere. Eyes of the nation upon you. For me personally, I always have super positive associations about night games at Ohio Stadium. For the most part, was there? I believe one of the first night games ever was the UCLA game when Belisari played and just went off. I remember Belisari playing and just playing one of I believe he played one of the great games that he ever played in his career. And again, unless people, our listeners can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he balled out on a night game, and I'm pretty sure it was UCLA. And but I've always loved the night games, and again, I'm spoiled because I'm on the club level in the suite. So I just throw another blanket on and it gets extra hot cocoa or something like that. But for people sitting in the stands, I bet it's going to be a little bit cold. But I like night games. I think the benefit of night games far outweigh the downside to night games. I think the winterization. I mean, look, you're in the Midwest. It's not going to be much colder than it was when you guys played in '06 against Michigan. I mean, that was cold. And
Yeah.
so I think whether you have people in the stadium or you're not. I mean, that stadium's been standing for 100 years, in the cold, and I think it'll hold up. I think it'll hold up just fine. I think I think what the coaches are upset about is, hey, why didn't you just tell us? Why didn't you just tell us you were going to make a change like this before you just announced something like this? And that's whenever you do that in business and life and anything like that, you generally get pushback. And I think what you're just seeing right now is a pushback. But personally, I love the games.
Yeah, like I said, I think it'll be fun. I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be juiced up. I think that obviously Michigan State could be an absolute dumpster fire by then. By mid-November, they might be 2-7. So I mean, you might be number 2 Ohio State versus unranked Michigan State just because that seems to be how they do. But I'm telling you, I think that this could be a new thing. We're gonna have multiple night games now in November. That's not going away. I think that's a big driver for television. I think that's the future. Again, like Sunday Night Football, the NBC Saturday night game or whatever game of the week is going to be a new thing because I think that they own that time slot. I'm actually really excited to see the games on NBC because for whatever reason, I think their production values are the best when you watch Sunday Night Football. For whatever reason, I don't know if it's the cameras they use or what it is, but their HD in 4K is absolutely stunning compared to CBS and Fox and all their other competitors. So I think that'll be fun. We had a very interesting list that we got a little bit info on regarding a max out on something called a hip press, which is something that it's a machine. It's a lot like a leg press. A lot of you lifters, you types of guys. The strongest guy on Ohio State's entire team in terms of both reps and weight was George Fitzpatrick. 30 reps of 750 pounds on the leg press, which is something that, for some people, like, oh, it's not a back squat, it's not a 225 bench, but that's a lot of weight to do 30 times. And, then Cade Stover was at 27 reps, 650 pounds. Tommy Eichenberg's right behind him with 26 reps. X Johnson and Lathan Ransom were both at 550. So the little guys, the speed guys did 550. Big speed guys did 650, and then the power guys did 750 for their rep outs, and it was who could get the most reps. And Nevada, were you surprised that George Fitzpatrick is the strongest guy on the team at this point?
Well, you're always surprised whenever you hear anybody is the strongest in a group of super strong guys like this. But as for George, I mean, this is a guy that's a really good player, and the only reason we don't know more about him is because we just haven't had a chance to see him yet. But he is a heck of a player. He is smart. He is a tireless worker. He is strong as an ox. He's got a great mentality. I mean, he does all the little things right. He's a dude. He's a guy that I'm saying right now he will play in the NFL on Sundays, and he's a guy that you're going to have to keep an eye on because I don't know how they're going to keep him off the field. I think he's that good, and I think this type of brute strength. I mean, think about it. Again, he was clearly stronger than everybody else on the team, and this is a group of strong guys. So George has definitely differentiated himself, but I think he's a name to watch for on the offensive line this year for sure. He's definitely my dark horse candidate on the line. Probably my dark horse candidate on the entire offense this year. I expect great things out of him, and I think he's going to have a big season.
I do too. And again, I think the bigger thing is he's only a true sophomore. I mean, he is really young. So, I mean, for him to be that young and be that strong, it's scary. It's not like he's a fifth-year senior. He's a guy who's been around the program for a long time. So he's put in major work because you can't fake these tests. Even you can say, well, it's a leg press. I mean, you're still doing the same weight as everybody else. You're moving the weight. I don't know. Like I was shocked. I really was. I thought it would have been. If you put a gun to my head, I'd say Donnie Jackson probably would have been my first pick. If you say who's going to be the biggest guy, the strongest guy. But good for George. I mean, honestly, I was cautiously optimistic because, like I said, I've watched this guy play a lot. I think he's got great power. I think he has fantastic feet, and he has a really nice vertical set. So, like when you watch all that, and then you don't realize his raw power and how strong he is, it makes you feel good because I'm like, well, his technique's great, and if he's really this strong, because the knock on him, just because I don't know all the weight room numbers, I hear a lot, but when you get some info like that, you're just like, wow, that's really good. I mean, when you're number one on the entire team in anything, that's great. When it's a feat of strength, that's fantastic. When it's something that's it tests your lower body endurance and explosion, about as good as it gets. Like if you say, what would you want to be number one at? It'd be like, lower body force, because then you can stop the bull rush. You've got a big trunk. It helps your speed. You're putting more force on the ground. I already thought he was a super athlete. I mean, I've watched a lot of his film, watched his high school film, because, we watched a lot of high school film with some of these guys because they haven't played in college. So, I mean, other than watching a couple of snaps against Rutgers when they're up by 60 points, like you're not going to see a lot. And, when a kid plays 4 games like him and Tigra and some of these guys that are being counted on and they redshirted last year, there's not a lot of quality snaps on there. So you got to go back to the high school film and see what made coaches take these guys. But yeah, I'm excited about him. That was a big number. Mayan Williams had a huge number too. He was 650 for 23 reps. So good for Mayan. I mean, he's a guy that didn't do much in the spring, but he's a guy, a lot of these guys are starting to sharpen their swords because it's NFL time. It's time to get paid. And they see, there's nothing more motivating for these kids than when they see Paris Johnson go 6 overall, they see Jackson Smith-Njigba go 20 or wherever he landed, CJ go 2. And now it's time to go. I mean, those guys are all 1 year older than a lot of the guys who are the same age or maybe even a year younger. And so it's go time for a lot of these guys. We I don't know. I'm going to take a couple questions here. Brass tacks. I don't know. I don't know why people haven't talked about Fitzpatrick this spring. I think it's because there's been a presumption of the tackle race being between Josh Fryer at left, then Tigra and Zen at right tackle. I think it was more because the biggest thing I think that he didn't get any talk is because he didn't get any reps with the ones. Because I think they're trying to really keep Josh at left tackle, and they gave him basically 90% of the reps with the ones. And I think that they rotated Zen over there like for maybe a day or two. And the rest of the time it was, Zen and Tigra at right tackle. And, those guys are maybe a little ahead of George. But I mean, I watched George in the spring game, and I think our 2 best pass blockers, maybe not at this very moment, but by the end of the season, could be him and Luke Montgomery. And I know the Luke Montgomery thing's crazy because he's an 18-year-old, but he's got the best athleticism. He's got a great pass set. I mean, these guys they all need to get stronger. I mean, there's guys that are 22 years old that still need to get stronger. So he's got to get stronger. But, he reminds me of Eric Winston. I think he could hang in there. If not this year, then next year he could definitely start at left or right tackle and just pass block. Because I think in the modern game, the way Ryan Day's offense is now, pass blocking is 99% of the equation. If you're the best pass blocker on the team, especially tackle, you're playing over anybody that could potentially run block over you because we throw the ball so much. And you got to keep McCord or, Drake May or whoever our quarterback is, you got to keep him upright. And that's the new age. Nevada, were you surprised there wasn't more talk about Fitzpatrick during the spring?
Well, I mean, we talked about him, and he's the guy that we've been talking about. And the bottom line is, we've got a lot of options on the offensive line. I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the only thing we're lacking in the offensive line is experience. And it's not a position. The offensive line is not one that lends itself to backups getting experience and getting reps. You generally play the first five. Maybe a sixth guy comes in and wears the tight end jersey. Maybe a seventh guy plays, but that's it. It's not hockey lines like the defensive line. You're not rolling wide receivers like you're doing it, or running backs. Like, offensive line does not lend itself to playing 10 guys or playing 12 guys. So all we've got, the only question that we have on the offensive line is experience. It's not talent. There's lots of dudes in the offensive line, and when you start going around and you start throwing, it's Donnie and Fryer and Hinsman and Jacob James, who's a guy that that. Don't sleep on him for the starting center, because he might end up being the guy. And Matt Jones and Tegra and Zen and George and Luke. I mean, it's just like, and we got a lot of guys in the offensive line room. So it's like we didn't, and this is after losing 3 guys early to the NFL draft. I mean, it's probably like the most loaded room other than the wide receiver that we have on the entire team. It's like we have dudes on top of dudes. They just haven't played. So, like I said, my consternation or questions that I have is strictly about who they're going to put in there and what they're going to do, but not that they're going to do well in what they're going to do, because we've got lots of options and these are talented players. And I think competition only makes you better. And I think the competition is going to be fierce all the way through the fall and probably through the first couple of games. But I think we're going to end up with an absolutely superior line at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's tough, man, when you're Justin Fry or Ryan Day or whoever, when you are anticipating, well, who could be back? Well, okay, Paris is gone. Everybody in the University of Paris is gone. Paris, as soon as he got on campus, we knew he was gone in 3 years. So, my German Shepherd could have coached him and he would have been a top 10 pick. Luke Whippler, gone. That was, I think, more surprising to the staff. I wasn't surprised at all because I heard midseason he was gone. So people thought I was crazy, but I was also right, which isn't, not shocking because, when I hear something and I go with something that's that out of left field, it's usually because I have it, a really good source on it. And then DeWand, I just felt like he was dying to get out of here no matter what. There's no way you're going to keep him here. Even with a big NIL deal, he just wanted to move on. I think that some guys, he's a year older than Paris. I think some guys are just dying to get the bag. And I think guys like DeWand, like, they got to strike while the iron's hot. Like, he had an All-American season by CBS Sports. He was all Big Ten. Time to go. I think if he had came back, he could have been, an Outland Trophy candidate. But, like, some guys don't want to stay in school for 5 years. Some guys want to get out of here. Some guys want to go get paid, go pro. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, that's not being critical of DeWand, but he's in the league now. And in the league, it is no joke. It's very tough. And he's finding out, when he fell out of rookie minicamp because he was out of shape, that, they're not going to baby you for long. I mean, he's a 4th round pick, so he'll be on the Browns this year for sure. And then after that, he's got to earn the roster spot. They don't usually cut 4th round picks unless you're just terrible. And when you're a big left tackle or right tackle, they're definitely not going to cut you. But I don't know. I think, we got, we're going to talk some Fongbaum now. Fongbaum, KJ Bolden to UGA. I don't know. Like, I mean, Georgia getting a kid from Georgia who is a safety and their defense has been the best in the country the last 2 years. Like, nothing surprises me. Again, like, when we lose a kid to Georgia or Bama, I don't really get upset with our coaching staff, because especially when they're from Georgia, because, this is the national champions and they just, but the visits still have to happen. Again, these kids commit all the time. These kids get Fong-bombed all the time. Because, like, Steve Whitfong, he does a nice job. He gets all the information from the edits. But you guys got to remember, like, Steve Whitfong picked Dylan Raiola to go to Ohio State, Nebraska, Georgia, back to Nebraska, back to Georgia. So, the Fong-bomb is like kind of like something that you write down in soft pencil and then you erase it as the facts change. So, is it great for Ohio State? No. Is there a chance that he signs with Georgia? Of course. But, until all the visits go through and these kids sign on the dotted line in December, I honestly really don't care. I think a lot of it's fodder. And again, like Whitfong, if you look at how many times he changes his predictions, like his predictions really shouldn't even count. And like I said, I think he does a good job, but I mean, him doing a Fong bomb, it's not like some sort of, life-altering thing that he won't change 4 other times, because these kids are just kind of, they get excited, they go to Georgia's spring little thing that they just had, and then all of a sudden, next week he goes to Clemson or goes to Ohio State, and then he does a scavenger hunt at Ohio State, and then magically this, man, I want to be a Buckeye. And, because these kids are they love attention. They love to be wishy-washy. They love to drum up their followers on Twitter and Instagram. So they just plead with every fan base to try and get some love. And again, the back channel part of this is that now these kids have NIL negotiations going on. So, if you're a kid that's just low maintenance and Bobby Buckeye, yeah, I love Ohio State. Ohio State's great. I'm committed. Don't worry about me. Then that doesn't really drive up your value in the backroom NIL negotiations with all these collectives that are, they are what they are. So, but when you say, oh, I'm going to go visit Georgia and I'm going to go visit Penn State, I'm going to go visit Bama and I'm going to go visit Clemson and the U, and then I'm going to go to Ohio State. Like, don't you think that gets the collectives a little bit more like, oh boy, you better come with the bag, better come with a check because this is a live one. What are your thoughts of that, Nevada?
Well, 100% right, and on top of that, it's you understand they're all trying to drive their social media value in terms of like adding followers and things like that. So, what's the best way to add followers? Well, hey Clemson, let me hear from you. Hey Georgia, let me hear. I mean, it's smart. I mean, it's just smart. That's the game. They're playing it, and that's definitely the way to do it. The days of just being quiet and doing your thing and declaring, committing early and not taking any visits and doing that, like that's the way to minimize your value from an NIL standpoint. It's really not maximizing it, and these guys are all about maximizing their value. And again, who can blame them?
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is not just pontificating. This is real stuff that's going on in the world. There are kids that have cash offers on the table just to decommit right now. Just decommit, not commit to another school, just decommit from the current school. There's kids, they get paid money to show up on unofficial and official visits now. And that's not legal, but it happens. Like there's kids that, hey, come to this junior day or come to this scavenger hunt and we'll pay you money to do that. Like, again, not legal, but in the world of NIL, nothing is cut and dry. So there's like all these little wrinkles, like, when kids are just taking all these visits. Now, the worst thing of all time is now there's no cap on official visits. Because back in the day, you could only have 5. Now, it's infinite. So kids can go on 10 official visits if they want. And again, that's stupid. And I think that there's going to be schools like Ohio State that aren't going to honor official visits because they don't feel like paying for a kid to pay for their flight, pay for their hotel, pay for their meals, pay for their per diem, pay for their mileage. Like there's all these things that come along with an official visit, and official visits are very expensive. They're, $2-3 grand a kid. Then you got to fly mom and dad up. So, I mean, it ends up being $5-6 grand because, they're eating at Hyde Park and they're, tours and goodies and nice hotels and all this stuff and airfare. And, the way airfare is expensive and the way food's expensive, like you're not going to take all these kids on official visits, even if they all want to try to come. So it's going to be interesting to see how that rolls because, when you start enhancing these recruiting budgets or when you start, making these recruiting budgets more bloated, you got to go find money to pay for that. And last I checked, like Ohio State's, the athletic department isn't in the greatest financial shape right now because like I said, they just had to take a loan out for that 2020 season because they didn't make any money. They had to take a loan from another part of the university for a lot. It was multiple dozens of millions of dollars. And, that's just where they're at. They don't have money to burn. They want to build new stadiums. They want to do, all this ancillary stuff. So it's tough. Nevada, Daniel Henry was the first guy in here, so we get to answer your stuff. McCord Brown, is the QB race over? Yeah, I think it's McCord all day. And I'm not saying that because that's my preference. I like Devin Brown better, but I think that McCord's going to be the day one starter. Nevada, are you on the same wavelength as I?
I think he's the day one starter, but I don't think that story's. I don't think that's the final chapter of that story at all. I don't think it's even close to the final chapter. I think you could see, if McCord is not getting it done, they will not hesitate to go and give Devin Brown a chance. And if Devin Brown moves the team, then I mean, I think it's going to go. I think it's going to. They're both going to get chances in the fall, and that one could go back and forth. So buckle up on that one.
Totally agree. D Sunny Super Chat. Appreciate you, brother, as always, holding it down. The question is, if NIL was around since the Cooper era, what Buckeye do you think would have had the best NIL deal in history? Well, I can think of a couple of guys off the top of my head. I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, AJ Hawk, I mean, had to have been right at the top for most marketable, most. I mean, he made a fortune on the autograph circuit when he hit it after that Fiesta Bowl where he sacked Brady Quinn and Laura's wearing the Brady Quinn AJ Hawk half jersey and they kept flashing to her. So AJ, I think, would have been at the very top going into his senior year. Ezekiel after the national championship year would have been super hot just because, that 14 team was kind of a year ahead of time because that 15 team was the one that everyone thought was going to be the juggernaut. And they ended up, losing the one game to Michigan State, which was unfortunate, but is what it is. I don't know, Nevada, who do you think would have had the best NIL deal in history since the Cooper era?
I'd say Katzenmoyer. I mean, Katzenmoyer would have been that. I can't even imagine what that would have been like. The Katzenmoyer craze was something else. Obviously before that, you go back to Spielman and the whole cover of the Wheaties box and all that stuff. But the Katzenmoyer craze was unlike anything that I've ever seen at Ohio State before or since, and that would have been a big one.
Yeah, like I mean, when I was around, I mean, Ted Ginn was like just unbelievably popular. I think Troy, obviously leading up to the Heisman that '06 year. Really, the thing is you kind of look when you look at the NIL stuff. I look at how did guys finish the season individually? How did the team finish the season? So, after that '05 Fiesta Bowl, the Notre Dame, we're preseason number one. Guys like Ted Ginn and Troy would have been the ones that would have made bank, like mega bank, just because they were the two preseason All-Americans. Troy was the favorite to win the Heisman. He eventually won the Heisman. 'Cause I think that's how you cash in on NIL. I think that I think that something that companies really want when they do an NIL deal with an individual player is you want that kind of that run up to the season. And then you don't want to do an NIL deal with a kid in September, October, and then you get him for 3 months and then I'm off to the NFL. Like you want to get him in January so you get that full run up of appearances and commercials and, radio spots, all the stuff that these kids can do now. So, I would always think about who had the big bowl game and how did the team finish and what was the projection for next year? Because like at '06 we were projected to be number one. We were number one up to the last game, which we lost. But I mean, for the NIL people, like that would have been a great deal if you had Troy and Ted up until the last game. You're set because I mean the NIL deals usually expire when the last game hits all zeros. Because then after that the professionals and everything kind of is recalibrated and reset. Because then there's no longer an NIL deal. Then it's like a professional endorsement. So, I think Troy.
Yeah. But I think I'm looking at NIL completely differently because like you're looking at NIL in terms of the promotion, and I'm looking at NIL for what it's really about, which is about recruiting kids to your school. So like paying kids once they're here to me on NIL is irrelevant. Like getting CJ Stroud a second Bentley or something like does nothing for me. But like getting kids to the school means everything. Can you imagine what the NIL offers would have been for Terrell Pryor during his recruitment?
Oh, but yeah, I mean that's the thing is like when you're looking down the pike at Joe Bauserman and Todd Beckman and those guys. And then you got Terrell in the distance. And, like the thing with like Terrell is like, if he doesn't go to Ohio State, he goes to Michigan. So, I mean, like, that's not like if you lose him, he goes to Georgia and we might see him in the national championship game or the college playoff. Like with Terrell, it was like, if we don't get him, we're going to see him the next 3 years, 4 years against us in the big house. So, that's where I think you throw the nitrous oxide into the deal, because Ohio State, all the NILs are going to bring the bag, because you don't want to go see Terrell on the other sideline going against him, because Terrell was a supernova, man. That kid was unbelievably good and talented in college. And, I think I honestly couldn't imagine. Do you think he would have been the largest NIL recruit of the last 20 years for Ohio State?
I don't think there's any question. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to remember the recruiting intensity of that one. I mean, there were recruiting stuff going on every single day on Terrell Pryor. You know what I'm saying? Whether it be Oregon or Texas or you know Penn State or Michigan. I mean, that was the most crazy recruitment that I've ever remembered. And I can't even imagine what would Phil Knight have thrown at Terrell Pryor to get him to Oregon.
Everything. I
Everything.
mean, Chip Kelly's offense,
Yeah.
everything,
I mean, 20 million, 30 million.
yeah, I mean, when you're worth 40 billion and you're 80 years old, I mean, or 75 at that time, like, why not? I mean, you're not buying green bananas anymore when you're that old, and you got the money, and it's
Oh,
like, you want Oregon to go win a natty before you die. It's like, you better get them all the Terrell Pryors you can get. Daniel Henry, this is a great one. Maurice Claret would have been a very interesting one after we beat the Hurricanes, because that was a hot ticket, man. I mean, people thought he was going to be the next Jim Brown in the league. God bless Jim Brown. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of the position, the personality next year's team, because I was on that '03 team. We were preseason number 1 or 2 by every magazine. And obviously, we didn't get it done. We lost to Wisconsin, lost to Michigan, ended up with 2 losses on the year. But that team had 20 starters back from a team that won the national championship, and then we lost Maurice, so we were down to like 19 or 18. But yeah, he would have been a great one, I think, in the NIL era, even though he was kind of in the NIL era, but this wasn't called the NIL era. Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say there's a lot of in our chat. There's a lot of noise for Terrell Pryor right now, and I totally agree. I think you guys are spot on about that. Shout out Naples, my man Jeff. We got Naples in the house. Shout out where you guys are from too. I didn't say that earlier. But yeah, I think that we got Eddie, Orlando, Joey Galloway, Boston. Boston would have been a really interesting one after that Rose Bowl performance, I think. Just because he was a flat out superstar, catches a game winning touchdown as a freshman. So that would have been an interesting one. He was a very interesting cat. I talked to some guys that played with him in Arizona and had some wild stories about David Boston. But he's a beast, though, that's for sure. Orlando, I mean, I think Orlando going into his junior year would have been huge, but I just, in general, linemen just don't get the NIL big deals. Now, it's funny now because everyone's saying that, to get tackles, you have to get big NIL deals ready to go to get them to transfer in. So maybe Orlando might have broke the bank. I mean, he won a major award as a true sophomore, is projected to be a top 5 pick going into his junior year, ends up going number 1. I don't know. Like, I think that the hard part for me, like with NIL and when you're looking through the viewpoint of a fan and a company, is that, you want the guys that people buy jerseys of. So AJ Hawk, Ted Ginn, Troy Smith, Maurice Claret, Terrell Pryor. Like, you don't see a lot of 75 jerseys walk around the stadium. It's not because he's not the greatest player in school history. It's because he's just a lineman. People want the guys that score touchdowns and sack the quarterback and make tackles, and you hear their name on the PA system. It's like when you're a car dealership and you've got Garrett Wilson and he scores 10 touchdowns. Every time he scores a touchdown, it's like he's on your fantasy team. So I don't know. It'd be really interesting. That's a great question, though. We had a question on Simmons. Nevada, do you think Simmons is locked in at right tackle, or do any of the younger guys like Zen or Tiger have a chance to overtake him?
Oh, absolutely. I think he's locked in at right tackle in terms of that's the position he's going to play. but whether or not he's going to be the starter, I think is absolutely an open question. I think we'll know more as we kind of get through conditioning, kind of when we figure out where he kind of falls on the strength, matrix and things like that, how he kind of responds to coaching, how he responds to Coach Mick and the training staff. But no, I think he was a great addition to the room because it just gives you another option, a guy who's got double-digit starts in Division I football, at a sufficiently high level. I mean, San Diego State's no joke. So, no, I think he's a great option, but I think that would not be a bet that I would take in terms of him being the starting right tackle, for any extended period of time, because I don't think we have enough information right now, and I think that's going to be a heck of a competition.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I also think that if I'm Tigra and Zen and George and Luke Montgomery, like, when they bring in a guy to replace you and then they give him a bag of money, I'd be pretty motivated to like say, okay, well, you guys think this guy's the truth? Well, I'm gonna take a spot and let him watch me. I'm gonna let him hand me the water bottle when I come to the sideline at TV timeouts. And it's always funny how the stories I've heard about the NIL stuff and how it motivates kids, and it's good, but it's not all good. And I mean, there's some stuff that guys, they take it as a slight, and if they're smart, they'll use that as a competitive edge. If I'm some of these guys that I think are just as good as him and maybe a little bit younger, I'd go after it. I'd use that as motivation, but this is my opinion. Haskins is another guy that probably would have gotten the bag but I mean, Haskins left a year, he left after 3. So I mean, it's kind of like Haskins was kind of like with Paris, where, Paris Johnson, he leaves after 3. Nobody thought Dwayne was going to leave after 3, and he did. So you got to go get Justin Fields. And unfortunately, there wasn't a Justin Fields on the O-line, but I still think the line's going to be fine. Oh, this is a good show.
No, hold on. Let me ask you a question about that.
Sure.
For a guy like Haskins, could you use NIL conceivably to convince a guy like that to come back for a year that you think he really needs to kind of develop as that long-term NFL type of prospect? Do you think Ohio State could put together a sufficient enough NIL package to convince a guy like that to come back for another year and use NIL as kind of an offensive weapon on that side, to convince a guy that's on the fence? Do you think Haskins was a guy that would have listened to a pitch like that?
No ancient. I think that's just a pipe dream. And again, that's nothing against people that hopes that happens. But I'll just give you an instance. Paris Johnson went 6 overall in the draft, signed his deal, 4 years, $28 million, fully guaranteed. His 5th-year option likely will be picked up. That'll be $14 million-ish. So 5 years, $42 million. So, if you average that out, that's 8 and some change. So no kid's going to get an $8 million NIL deal, or a $6 million, or a $5 million, or $2 million. I mean, a lot of these NIL deals are $100,000, $150,000, and again, that's great money. That's fantastic money. Some of these collectives, in Miami are throwing out $1 million or $2 million over the course of 4 years, but that doesn't touch 28 million, 30 million. And if you produce, you hit free agency at, like Paris Johnson, if he produces, he's going to be a free agent when he's 25. So his second contract.
You don't think some big booster is going to come up with $6, $8, $10 million to keep a guy around for another year?
Not at Ohio State, unless
not at Ohio State, but somewhere else.
Oh, I mean, of course. I mean, like Texas A&M or at Oregon, or schools, where they've got like mega donors, where there's a mega donor who runs the collective, then of course. Yeah. I mean, I never say never, because I don't deal in absolutes. I'm not only Siths deal in absolutes, but I'm just telling you, it ain't here. I don't think so. I mean, I've heard the numbers these guys have gotten. I've got great sources on, 2 of the collectives have great sources. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, now if you're asking me, could a guy like CJ Stroud come back and go somewhere else and get $7 or $8 million? Maybe. I don't know. But I don't know why you wouldn't just cut to the chase and go to the league. If you're ready to go to the league and you're ready to be a first round pick, I don't know why you just don't go to the league. Just start the clock in your free agency and get rolling. Even if you really need it, like Dwayne Haskins severely needed college for another year, severely. And he proved it. Just grossly immature, a kid that, And again, but with kids like that, like you can't really tell them anything, and
Yeah,
he
I just wonder on a kid like Haskins because I tend to agree with you, and I like discussing having these perspectives on this. I just think that when the calculus is you can get zero playing college, or essentially zero, or you can get millions of dollars in the NFL. Does it change at all if now it's not zero? You can get $1 million or $2 million or something like that to stay on. I just be interested to see if that ever affects anybody's thinking down the road about doing it. And it may just be a pipe dream, and it may just be one of those those unicorn types of situations. But I just wonder if that would push a kid that maybe wants to stay, but just financially, it's just I can't afford to work, stay, work another year at my trade for just getting the stipend and room and board. Um, if they threw a couple million at him, then they might decide to stick around. But
well,
we'll see.
I think that the other side that I think that people don't talk about, there's always kind of an undercurrent of in these scenarios when these kids leave early is you got to strike while the iron's hot. If you're a kid and you're Dwayne Haskins and you threw for 50 touchdowns and 10 picks and silver football, and you say, he had the greatest Michigan game. That Michigan defense was like #1 in the country, and Urban Meyer's offense threw all over them. What else do you want? I mean, it's like CJ Stroud. Like, does CJ need another year? Yeah. But guess what? That Georgia film, pure money. Absolutely pure money. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just think I think I mean there are stats regarding sufficient numbers of starts for quarterbacks and longevity in the league and things like that. I mean there are some pretty compelling numbers regarding that, and so I'm a big numbers guy. I always say you fight the numbers at your own peril. And for a guy like Haskins, I mean Haskins to me would be the ultimate cautionary tale of a guy who needed to not strike while the iron was hot and needed to have the discipline to come back for another year, perfect his trade, and who knows how that story would have turned out, but certainly couldn't have turned out. It had to turn out better than it did because the story ended as tragically as the story could possibly end. So who knows? Not my life, and it's certainly I'm the last person to criticize somebody for going out and getting you know paid generational wealth or $8 million, $10 million, $40 million. I mean, look, that is never a bad decision when you make a decision like that. So I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth on that issue, but it is an interesting one.
Well, I do think that 4 years, and again, the number of starts is a huge indicator. I mean, Deshaun Watson did 4 years. Andrew Luck did 4 years. I believe Mahomes did, Mahomes might have only been 3. But the ultimate, the two ultimates, Tom Brady, 5 years. Peyton Manning, who was the most NFL-ready quarterback in the history of football, the history of the draft, literally, was a third-year junior, could have came out. Bill Parcells had the #1 pick with the Jets. And, Peyton came back for his senior year. Matt Leinart, a guy that would have been the #1 pick of the draft, came back for his senior year. And again, Matt Leinart slid down the draft boards to like 10. And if he would have came out the year before, he had been the #1 pick. So, and that was, I want to say that was the year Alex Smith went #1, the Aaron Rodgers draft where Rodgers should have been #1. But again, if Leinart comes out after, year 4, he's the #1 pick. So again, it's not just like a linear path, and there's not just like one variable. There's like 20 variables, like how well did I do in my last game? How good's the team going to be next year? How good are my weapons going to be next year? For me, the big one is who's at the top of the draft this year. Because I thought CJ going to Houston, I don't know. I hope for the best, but defensive head coach, if there's one thing I dread for quarterbacks going to the league, it's having a defensive head coach. And why is that? Well, because, who do you think is going to change out their offensive coordinators more often? Because, if you have Sean McVay as your head coach, he's also your offensive coordinator. If you have Ryan Day as your head coach, he's also the offensive coordinator. Dylan Rilla is going to Kirby Smart, and he might have 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years. You go to the league, offensive coordinators get fired a lot by defensive guys. I think sometimes The defensive guys, they great and they wear on the offensive guys, and so, I mean, I think, Bryce Young going with Frank Wright, who's a 15-year quarterback in the league and a really good offensive guy, and he's developed quarterbacks and he's done a good job as an offensive coordinator, won a Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator. That was like the primo spot to me. Houston was a distant second because, you have a first-time head coach. You don't have a lot of weapons. You have Robert Woods, who's like 35 years old now, as your number one receiver. I don't know, but we're going to find out. Again, I just think that the number one thing for a quarterback to be successful in the league is infrastructure. And if you don't have infrastructure, which includes your head coach, your offensive line, your skill players, it can be really tough. We're going to wrap this, Nevada. Any final thoughts? This is a great episode. Thank you, guys. Great questions, as always. You guys are literally bringing the if people say they want a call-in show, man, I think a call-in show would be fun. Any final thoughts, Nevada?
Kevin Warren, bad. George Fitzpatrick, good. That's it.
Kevin Warren does not get an NIL deal from us. He actually has to pay the NIL fund the money back. He is. It's just thank God he is gone, because what a train wreck that guy was. So, we'll wrap this. Well, cool. We appreciate you guys as always. We appreciate you guys. Oh, go this way. Bloop. So, BuckeyeScoop.com on fire today. Tons of great content. A lot of great stuff going on. Really appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. If you could, first off, since I forgot to say it, shout out where you're from. I saw Naples, Florida. Shout out Naples, my hometown. That is the southern home of Ohio State fans, because there's more Ohio State people down there than anywhere else in the universe, I think. But Canton, Ohio, Cleveland, Atlanta, Ghana. We got people all over the world watching this, so we appreciate you guys as always. If you enjoyed this content, please leave us a like, click subscribe, send this podcast to a friend. Tell them to come on these live shows, man. If you like these live shows, click that alert button. Again, we appreciate you regulars. Daniel Henry is the first one here, so big shout out. We got Grand Rapids, Ohio in the house. Also, thank you, Chuck. Thank you all you guys for Brass Tacks. All you guys that are in here, we appreciate you guys every day. Coming and kicking it, man, because we have a blast. And you guys bring the fire. And D Sunny, Smoky Mountains, I love it. I love shouting out the Smoky Mountains. D Sunny, as always, thank you for the super chat. Again, you guys are the best. So appreciate you guys. If you guys are not on BuckeyeScoop.com, if you guys love this podcast, join BuckeyeScoop.com, because that is where it is like this podcast 24 hours a day. I live on there. Nevada lives on there. Bill Greene's on there. And we are just cranking content. So we appreciate you guys. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your night. This might be it for LeBron. So be tuning into that. And also, see you guys tomorrow. So go Bucks. Thank you so much, Buckeye Nation. Thank you, Scoop family. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Go Bucks.